It's on. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Spinner Rack. I'm here with my boy, Petey. What's rocking, Petey?
What up?
Hey, we're talking about some news that we heard about. Two former Black editors of DC Comics are talking about the fact that while they were members of DC and they worked for DC, they did not have, they faced many different problems in, getting promoted while they were there. So I'm going to pass it on to my boy, Petey, to give us a little bit more background, and then we're going to delve right into this whole issue.
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have to go to my cheat sheet for that. You just tossed it right back to me. Well, I think it was Business Insider. They had an article on these two Black former DC editors. It's Harvey Richards and L.A. Williams. And they basically talk about their struggles during their long time at DC. Now, this ultimately would exclude the milestone period because DC did finance a imprint called Milestone, which had a ton of Black editors, creators. I think they're Latino. They had all these different, people of color creating comic books under this one line. So I guess we have to say that this would be excluded experience that the Milestone thing went through, because obviously Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cohen, all the other, Mark Bright, all the other people that were long-time people of color in the comic industry that have worked at both Marvel and DC. Ultimately, this does come down to two people, though, we would have to say, because their complaints are more directed at two professionals, and one being Paul Levitt and Mike Carlin. So ultimately, we can take it that this is a problem that DC has, because obviously with most professional jobs, you look around, you're looking for people of color, and you don't see them. So that is a thing. The fact that they say that, they did some good work, they were able to thrive at their job, and they had, reoccurring issues with the same person, I think each of them separately. I guess we can get into that later, but I'm taking the article outside of what it says, because the article says it's about Black editors at DC and their struggles. But there's these two guys, and they're not going through like the entire experience. They're saying these guys, and comics is a small business. So the top guys is Paul Levitt, and Mike Carlin would be one of the senior editors. I think he's now an animation guy. But he's one of the top guys before Paul Levitt kind of moved to the side. So these are the two top guys. So to run into the problem of, getting promoted and that sort of thing, and you had these two guys there, you're going to keep running into issues. So it's a sad thing to hear that these guys are longstanding pros that were in, I think Harvey Richards was in comics for 22 years before he was fired in 2019. And, his story, I think his story is the one that comes in conflict with, let's see, I'm looking at the article now. Harvey, they talk about being different, but having their experience be the same. So they're different.
Very similar, yeah.
Yeah, so in that, Richard struggles directly with Paul Levitt, because Paul Levitt had some problem with something that he wrote. And then he said that Richard would never be promoted while he was publisher and president, which is not necessarily, and Paul Levitt didn't respond. So he said this is a 20-year thing. So, this is, I guess, sort of old news to Paul Levitt. The problem with that would be is that comic books is the original canceled culture. Because and this obviously, this goes across the line with, this goes past color, because one of my favorite creators, John Byrne, he's been canceled for years for comments that he's made. You have Frank Miller on Twitter, he got canceled. Like, there are people still iffy on him. Jim Shooter, behind the scenes. We can go down the line. So in comic books, a lot of these things, they were the originators of when the internet happened, of bringing up these past things. This guy is not the past one, because it's actually his career. So he's talking about his career and the person he's run into struggling with was Paul Levitt. So I think Harvey, he was talking about getting an award, and Paul Levitt said, "Hey, someone thinks you deserve this." So it's like that's a culture that's sort of this, but it's a I don't know, it's a behavior thing between him and regretfully in this time, going through the past. If you go through the past, you ultimately start to hear. I've read in recent times, I've read a bunch of stories about Paul Levitt, one being of pushing out Jack Adler, who was the longtime guy who was in doing coloring and in production at DC, who was a pro. There was a couple of complaints. They asked Paul Levitt to look into it, pushed the guy out. So then we also have some you can hear on Robservations. He talks about the Superman and Spider-Man, the second collaboration. That was some struggle between Paul Levitt and Jim Shooter. That is some more hearsay. I don't have any sort of proof of that. But then we talked to one pro. I'm not sure he's going to want us to say it, so I won't say his name. But he said he was in the DC offices and working, and he was getting a soda in there, and they're like, "No, you can't get it." And then Dick Giordano came to Paul Levitt and said, "No, this is a comic professional. He can have a soda. He's sitting here and working. Don't bother. This is a comic creator right here." So it's like, it was interesting because obviously there's a person of color, and the respect that I can't say. It was a person of color told us that, so that narrows it down. So if he wants me to say his name, I would say it, but I won't otherwise.
That's pretty interesting.
I was going to go over.
Yeah.
Such a great story, but it's such a terrible story for Paul Levitt. So, so I'm sorry to say.
Paul Levitz.
Yeah, Paul Levitz. Sorry, not Levitz, but
yeah, and Levitz actually said that during his time that he saw that while those were decades old, and just as just a quote to what he said in the article, that he just to make sure I just want to make sure that we covered both bases, that we're not saying anything out of we're bringing up what's going on. But Levitz actually said that this is something that happened decades ago. Quote, "I'm not going to comment on decades-old incidents. I'm proud of the increasing diversity at DC in my time as an executive there. And while we didn't achieve an ideal balance, I think much changed for the better." And since and that was because of Richards. This was Richards' departure after his quote here. And this is Harvey Richards, who was on many different titles over at DC. And it's a shame when you hear stories like this, because it tells you like, hey, how hard it was for some of these guys who were basically stuck in the same position. And as assistant editor, you're there 22 years, and you're like, wait a second, I'm still an assistant editor. What's going on? Why have I not moved on? Why have I not been pushed somewhere else? If I'm not valued, if I'm not that valued, then why am I still here? You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So either you show us, you want us or something. Is it why are we still here? But clearly there was a lot more going on. He got fired in December 2019. What's going on? Hello.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
He's just checking in.
Okay. So
keep going.
Right. So I mean, it's a shocker when things like that happen, and you're like, "Yo, wait, what's going on, man?" Because that's not cool. And the same thing goes with L.A. Williams when he was, as he worked, and he was there for 6 years without a promotion. Especially when you get put on big titles like Superman, and you're like, "Whoa, what's going on?" Superman is one of the top titles. You figured that would come with some type of added promotions and responsibilities. And these are things you got to constantly push for, because if you don't, what happens here, these guys are labeled as I guess unsatisfactory, or they were not given the chance. If you don't get a chance to do something so you can prove what you're doing and show the worth of of your skills, then what's the point, right? And like you said, it's a very small, clubby industry, and unfortunately, Marvel and DC dominate. And once you need to go in there to get some type of proof, unless automatically you get your own comic and it takes off. There are tons of comics, and we go to many cons and we see the creators, and they're like, you see tons of them starting, and most of them, unfortunately, most of them will not become as successful or well known as the ones coming out of DC, who can then go to Image or do something else on their own. unfortunately. But yeah, this is very sad, and I hope things work out for them as time goes on, because I mean, the proof is in the pudding what they were able to produce. But
Well,
again, if you're put on secondary titles, that's hard too, right? I mean, if you put on secondary titles, yeah, they say, oh, you can work on this because but if the title is not getting the support, the marketing push, getting the tops, getting people who can, the artist, or allow you the freedom to do what you want to try and do with this particular character. So there's a lot to put in there,
well,
and
with Carlin, it seems like he was assigned William L.A. Williams was assigned an Impulse, and it went from hurting sales to a success. And then ultimately, as a editor or associate editor, you're supposed to bring in talent. He brought Walt Simonson to it, and then he got in trouble for bringing an A talent to Walt Simonson is still a freelancer, so it doesn't, being yelled at for that is kind of unwarranted. And then they guess it's tough to sort of hear these things. I've only heard another really bad story about him from the Rob Liefeld thing, but that's take it with a grain of salt. You're not really is what's I can't back that sort of thing up. And at the same time with this, since Mike Carlin didn't respond to it, then what can you say? You had to say something for that. And then even when he kind of his giving him I could work on, was it Superman title, Wonder Woman, and he said, Carlin said, I had my doubts about you, but you delivered. Everything's always on time. It sells. The critics like it. And he said, I guess he said the wrong thing to Carlin, said, thanks for my promotion. And he's interrupted, said it didn't come with a promotion. So it's like, it's kind of having, one of those old school, I mean, this is basically the old school kind of DC editors that if you've read Terry Austin talked about the classic run when he was working on Batman with Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers, how they were doing this work and the editor is just killing them, and then next thing you know, they're like, hey, we want you, so we want to put you guys on the regular Batman title, not just backups. They're like, what do you mean? Like, I think it was Joe Orlando. It's like, Joe Orlando, he just been tearing us apart. Well, he's just he's one of the old school guys. That's what he was taught. And he's like, wait a second, you taught one way, you taught a negative way, and then you repeat it? Like that's the whole, at that point in the 70s, they didn't believe in where the 80s are, the armchair psychology of you repeat what you do, of being like, if something happens bad to you, you do your best to do a 180 away from it when you're in power. And, and that I always call that is not what people, where the psychologists went. I say, people can't wait to be in power to do the same to someone else. So,
which sucks.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, it could be because we don't have the full story, and we have talked to only a couple of creators from Marvel and DC to know the actual. And there's been Black creators that have been at both Marvel and DC. It didn't seem like as creators. I don't know if this is sort of the editorial, whatever it goes behind the scenes. Obviously, we've met with, Black creators at DC and Marvel. So this may be the editorial sort of thing. This is the first we kind of really peered into the editorial, because ultimately the truth is, what do we know about editors? Some of them have a strong hand. Some of them are there to keep the books on time and proofread. So this has really given us a window into these two guys' story and their experience. Let's see, we had a question from, that's another person named Mars. He said, what was the experience for the other DC editors? I'm not sure. Ultimately, we know we know Mark Carlin. We know he had a hard time. I mean, that's the thing. Like, Carlin came under Jim Shooter, and he was ultimately fired when Byrne was at odds with Jim Shooter, and Carlin was catching heat, same as Denny O'Neil. And then soon after Byrne was gone, Denny O'Neil was fired, Mike Carlin was fired, and I think Byrne said Carlin was fired because Byrne left. But he was not. It wasn't like he was Byrne. I mean, they were friends, but he wasn't like the person who got. I don't believe he got Carlin the job. He was the guy when Byrne was struggling with the editor on Superman, saying, "Hey, some things are kind of not, getting back to you guys." And they were like, "Let's get this guy off this book. Let's put someone Byrne knows on it." And he's like saying, I didn't ask for Carlin, but okay." And then that led to Carlin having the big, the Carlini run, as they sort of say. So, I mean, he's a long-standing editor of some quality Superman stories that everyone remembers. So, what can we say? It's in the positions of power, it could be. No, we have the Latin. There's a question from No Prize Nation. There's the Ashley, what's it, Alonso from DC. That's Axel Alonso. I think that's the one who made it big at Marvel. So it's like most professions where
Well, basically, they don't get the chances. You don't see that many of them. You don't know many Latino, or Hispanic editors, and the same thing goes with the Black editors. You don't know that many. They don't. How many of them go on and become the head of?
There was the one, but he came under much heat, which was Jim Owsley. You know Jim Owsley?
I know. I don't know him off the top of my head. What books was he on?
He was on the book you were reading, which is called Deathstroke. That is the original name of Christopher Priest. So there's a Black editor. There was some sort of, he came under heat under Shooter because there was some issues with what's that thing? I think with Ned Leeds dying in Spider-Man, and Ned Leeds was also revealed as the Hobgoblin. So right. You have certain like this where he was under some heat, and then next thing you know, he becomes a long-standing creator. But he wrote a lot of funny memos at Marvel, and to have a career while that stuff is happening. So I only can think of Axel Alonso, and he made it big, and he's one of the big splash at Marvel. After Quesada was in, he was kind of the guy at Marvel. So.
But what about talent, though? I mean, you see a lot of talent showing up, pretty diverse talents all over for DC and Marvel and stuff like that.
Well, that's the thing. When you have, and that's the thing, it's not, I don't know that there's a large Latin sort of thing, but in Marvel, they had like a lot of people remember, if you remember the Vigilante comic book, do you remember that?
Yes, I remember those.
The artist on there, Keith Pollard, he did some like fill-in issues on the Titans. So I think while that period, people sort of looked at him as secondary to Perez, and then he took over, which was a gorgeous, those first 3 issues, and I think he did a couple other issues of Vigilante, but were amazingly, like the drawing's amazing. But at that time, people forgot that he was the guy that was had made it. No, I guess Perez was on Fantastic Four first. Then a little while after that, Pollard got on there. But Pollard also got, and Perez was off a bunch of books. He got Fantastic Four, he got Thor, and then him and Byrne both did tryouts for Amazing Spider-Man. And guess who got Amazing Spider-Man?
Who?
Keith Pollard. Byrne remembers it. So it's like, Byrne did a 2 tryout issue and he didn't get the title. So it's like at that time, I don't know what these guys go through because I've read some interviews with Ron Wilson and Keith Pollard, and they haven't really said too much negative about this. I think Howard Mackey told a funny story about doing some sort of move on Keith Williams, who we interviewed. So it's like, I don't know. The only thing I have is one of those things that Christopher Priest says Jim Olsey wrote as a letter, but it was a gag letter about. So, and you have Billy Graham, who did the Black Panther way back when. So, I mean, there have been definitely people, and that's all it said. Rick Buckler had a lot of assistants, and those assistants were people of color, which was, of course, George Perez. You know, he was one of the assistants. They also, I think, I'm not sure if Keith Pollard was behind it, but there was a lot of people that came in through Rick Buckler, and there were a lot of people of color. I think in who is it? In Paul Levitt's eulogy of Rick Buckler, he pointed out that even though it was an old system of using assistants, it's not fair. Kwanzaa Life said it's not fair. And oh, wait a second. Mortal Big Shaq said, "What up, fam? Do you know
what
that?"
up, Big Shaq? What up?
So yeah, it's you know, there've been people of color. Oh, Sweat got the first white tiger. Man, I wondered who's the artist. Did Perez do those early? I don't know if Perez was the first one. Who was the first one on that?
I don't know who.
I'm asking.
That's a while back.
Jack.
Oh, that's going back a bit.
Yeah, but yeah. So it's. I think what was it? I can't think of. I mean, I can think of a lot of people of color, and obviously outside of George Perez.
So the point I'm trying to make is that in terms of color, there are, while the editorial side, which makes a big difference on who's put on what project, what they're doing, it's been pretty tight, pretty light. But on the and even on the comic side, while it's not been that much, there has been more people representing. And during the time period, wasn't Milestone? You said Milestone.
Yes.
Milestone. What was the era of Milestone? So
that's DC Comics, and we can't. You know, I think.
What was the time frame for that?
That had to be like 93. Let me check on the time frame on that. But it's right around the big comic boom.
Yeah.
Milestone.
Oh, that's right.
1993.
Immortal Big Shaq said it was the Spectacular Spider-Man 9. I don't know White Tiger's first Latino superhero. Wow, big up. You're right. That's I didn't know that.
There we go.
I thought there was something other before that. Before then.
So
we gotta check that one out, bro. Because I could have sworn it was something else. Let me check that.
Canceled around 95 and 96. That's Milestones from 93 to 95. That's
only 2 years? That's it? I thought it was longer.
The comic boom. The comic bust happened around that time too. Oh. But yeah, I mean, with that said, I'm sad for their experience. I had to applaud their perseverance. It seems like they definitely ran through, but it seems like, you know, to be able to connect with someone like Walter Simonson, one of them connect with Walter Simonson and get the awards from actual Warner Brothers, it shows that despite the complaints that these guys weren't, you know, they were about their business. And it wasn't just about, you know, it wasn't the complaints that they got. If they had complaints and then you get awards from the top brass, and if you're able to get, you know, be able to snatch Walter Simonson to do Impulse, which I'm like, I would search out you know, my favorite creators on these other titles. You know, I don't see.
But you know, but we gotta also look at the thing like in terms of business. We want to just be balanced a bit here. I don't want to just totally say, hey, it's no. But in terms of how much did it cost to do a Walt Simonson on Impulse versus him do a top label like Flash? If he's like just an in-house contract guy that, hey, it doesn't matter, he costs the same on all the books, then you're like, hey, it probably makes more sense. But if Walt Simonson and no one's telling him no, and he's willing to do 2 books, somebody had to approve that.
Well, I'm going to say to you like this. The thing is that you can talk as much as you want about his rate doesn't work for Impulse.
Right.
The thing is like the Superman books are rolling. If you're not calling him to do something, he still wants to work. So that's the problem. Yeah, you can say, all right, hey, you call Byrne to do this, you call Walt Simonson to do this. I got to pay them X amount of dollars because they get the top page rate. He's like, but they're not calling these guys. Like what's the name when people the stuff that they're calling them on, like put them on Superman. Like say, hey, we want you on this arc. Like these guys would probably pick it up. Like, come on. I mean, he did the Indestructible Hulk. So it's like if you didn't make the call, you can't really chastise, say, don't call these people. And he's not saying, well, I guess he is sort of saying it, but like the idea that we can't afford to pay him to do Impulse. And it's just like, well, back in the day, that goes into the problem. Whereas, these top guys, if they liked the story that came in, or the thing is like this, hey, this book is late. John, can you do, Bert, can you get this done in 3 days? Oh yeah, okay, no problem. That sort of thing, where it's like, and it could wind up in the back of Marvel Comics Presents and that sort of thing. So it's not, the way it was more like, hey, this guy's this guy's that sort of thing. It'd be more like, hey, you're here. He's like, what is this? That's the thing. I would wonder, like, when, I guess the best example, because he has been able to do a lot of work, is just finding Byrne on so many titles. And it's like, how did he get on this? How did he get to this? And it's just like, oh, sometimes I'm in office, sometimes people call, or even the New Mutants, where they're like, hey, I don't have time to do New Mutants. And the next thing he's like, hey, Magneto's goes bad. And, yep, I'll find time. Don't worry. That sort of thing. So,
but I mean, I get all that, but I'm just saying that I just want to just make sure it was clear to the guys that, it's more than just, hey, he got somebody there. And you're right. If you have a hot hand on one comic, you want to make sure that guy is also in other comics, also developing either art or stories, so that people can say, hey, this story is not, this comic was not quite as strong, has somebody who can come in there and help out. I just want to get back to Impulse. Our friend who was talking about Latino superheroes. I mean, been several Latino superheroes who've crossed over and made some bigger hits, or villains at least, like Bane, for example. But unfortunately, when they cross over to the movie side, it doesn't necessarily carry, because Bane, while he's a Latino, when you see him as a villain there, he's played by a non-Latino actor, basically. So that's another problem that you have with a lot of Latino characters, that they come out, but you don't even realize that they're Latino sometimes. Or if they are, they start changing up how they do and what constitute Latino. Because some people, like Miles Morales, is technically a Latino character, but they usually are playing up more that he's black, as opposed to he's also half Puerto Rican. You also have Robbie Reyes, who's from Marvel, and I'm just bringing up just a couple of Marvel people here, just to bring up just a couple. And
the characters?
The characters, yeah.
All right.
So I mean, I think with Latinos, it becomes so much more complicated in terms of how it's spoken about and how it's dealt with in terms of, identity, what do they identify, whether the people who are Latinos who are identifying with them. So that's why it tends to get very mixed. It shouldn't, what I'm trying to say? If you have a Latino character, theoretically, you should try and get someone who's Latino to do it. I'm not saying it has to be the only time.
Wait a second. You're talking about getting talent, you're changing it to that?
No, I'm not changing it. I just was touching base on that, that sometimes you can't identify who is the Latino character sometimes, because you see Latino characters who, great example, Sunspot from X-Men, right? From the New Mutants, right? He started off as a very dark-skinned character, Brazilian, who was Latino. Brazilians are considered Latinos because it's part of the whole Latin world, so many. And yet now, in some of the other interpretations of him, he's totally changed.
Just in the movie.
Yeah, well, the movie, yeah, which kind of threw us off there. But that kind of like, what the heck is going on here? So you like, whoa, give us a break here, right? So I just wanted to bring that about. But with the discussion is about the editors, the Black editors, Latino editors. Are they getting enough light in this whole with the Marvel and DC? And clearly, you don't see it. Their names are not there. They don't have the same opportunities as coming up. There has been a bigger push to get the talent out, but even that's been lackluster in over time. But I mean, as time goes on, the new comics, as you can see, they are being more diverse than they've ever been before because they're trying to get a larger audience. But it's taken a long time, and it seems as though it's going to take a little while to get there.
Are you trying to cover all your bases here?
Whoa. Where you going, bro?
I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. I'm trying to figure out. Everybody's like, you got all place born, spinning the place. There's diversity everywhere, and this, that, and the other. There's different characters, and I think it's said in saying that if you listen to what it said, it's their struggles with two creators, being that two separately, but at the same time similar, of someone that's not necessarily interested in promoting them while they're having successes in comic books. And that's what we have to look at in this story, because one doesn't want to talk about it and the other one is no comment. So that's the thing. You can state why, or you say, hey, his workload got, like, what about all the time before that when you were singing his praises before, right? That sort of thing. So I mean,
but look, if
take that lightly.
So, you're right. I always say you go back to, there was a group of editors, assistant editors, where all the group assistant editors treated the same, right? Did they also get the same opportunities to shine? Did they get the same opportunities of mentorship, or someone being there to show them what to do, how to do it? And that's where you start finding out whether or not this thing really is legit or not. And a lot of times you don't have the same thing with African American and Latino editors or artists and creators, because they don't have the people who have gone into them and invested time in them. And it's easy to say, oh, well, we just didn't connect. Well, that's true. Then, it's not everybody connects. But if you give someone an opportunity, and the key thing is the proof is in the pudding, do they sell? Do people gravitate? Do they write? If you give them the opportunity, do they get the right? Do they get editors? Do they get actors? Do they get writers and artists and pencilers? All those people to try and make a successful book that people are either buying or critics are either loving. And if they're doing that, then you got to then say, hey, well, we got to give them more opportunity to do more stuff so we can make. To me, I can't understand. It always goes back to me. That always fascinates me or bugs me out. The proof is in the money. If the money's coming in, how are you going to stop? You know what I'm trying to say?
That's the thing with Impulse. They're saying that it was a struggling book, and then the numbers started picking up. And this is the creation of Mark Waid. So it's not like they didn't want it to do well. I think Mark Waid created Impulse. So if that's the case, I don't know. It's just tough to sort of read. And if, they want to say shoddy work, I mean, that's what they're the company. These guys are the names of the company. They can say, here's the workload. I mean, this is frivolous. It's bull. They can say that. Their management. They can, I mean, it's not like, the thing is like this. If it's like a creator going against a creator saying, oh, you said this and you said that, this is like management and employee. Just point it out. That's right. What it is.
Yeah, that's right. So. So, I mean, that's basically what we got to say. I don't know what else we can say. I mean, yes. It's ABC. I mean, give an opportunity, see how, and give them the opportunity, give them the resources and the mentorship or guidance, and see what happens. If that's it, then, then you can say, hey, this person is not working out. But don't come say, hey, we didn't click, or, the intangibles in life. You know what I'm trying to say?
But it also proves that comic books aren't, well, the hard part is that they say that they're clubs.
Right.
Like in the, that they start to pick, let people in the club and let people out, that sort of thing. Like
right.
Across the board, you sort of have this sort of thing where they're not just saying, hey, I got this freelancer and he's doing X amount of work. I'm giving him more work because of X amount of work. And he came on time. its sales are going up, this, that, and the other. It's like the talk behind the scenes, and this is not related to these two guys' stories, but the idea that, you know, they had bonuses for people hitting their 12 issue marks. And then at the same time, they were still giving the bonuses when people weren't hitting their 12 issue marks, like on time, or having needed to fill in and say, well, no, but this, that, and the other, but it's close. And that's
Right.
so it's like, that's not, the thing is because the books are in time, that's what's leading to the readership going up and up. They're like, you know, we know company, but the problem is they also know that the big sellers take care of the little sellers. So if your first issue sells so much, it's like, oh, we got enough money to, you're still part of that initial success. I think there's also a story, I think it might have been I think the New Gods in the 80s, where they said that the creator was planning to leave pretty early on. So the first issue would be the big sales, and the next issue would be the little less sales. So DC
Right.
undercut it by letting another writer come in and write the first issue, and then the writer after that did the next the short arc that he was planning before he was gonna bolt. So, you know, it's a small business, but it's at the same time, it's like, what did they say about with Russia? He said they're a third world country with nuclear weapons. It's like a business masquerading as like a conglomerate. They have this thing that's connected to all this stuff, but it is kind of like still a clubhouse, you know.
Yeah. But it's still business or not, you know, if we keep running it like a clubhouse, you know what's going to happen?
Well,
You're going to
that's what we
disappear.
got.
You're going to disappear like all the other former comics. You know, that's why.
That's what we got.
Yep. You know.
If they were people interested in saying, people looking at it and being able to ignore the monthly part of comics and being like, we don't need to respect that your sales, like the basic attendance, hitting your attendance mark or the shipping mark being right is can lead to your success. Say like the last time I guess it could have happened with The Walking Dead, like hitting that thing and the numbers going up. That used to be it's the telltale sign of success. Ultimately, even you look at the X-Men, when it was 6 times a year, it was struggling. When it was monthly, you know, it picked up into and slowly became a juggernaut. So ultimately, the clubhouse thing should be, but it's like, you know, I don't know. You want to get the hot guy, the hot artist, and you want to get your friends in. So that's what business is. That's what this business. I mean, it is some like that sort of stuff is in all business, but not to the extent it seems. I'm not an insider, so I wouldn't exactly know. But this is the probable things that could happen. I don't know. That's best I can say.
Yeah. All right, then let's wrap it up. Hey, thanks everybody for listening to us. Put a spotlight on this issue of Black editors and also Latino editors and artists and creators. You know, and what we say, give everybody a chance, right? That's what we say here, right?
Yes. Give
everybody a chance.
All right.
Spinner Rack.
Out.
Thanks. Subscribe. Give thumbs up.